To understand the value of cinnamon in Rome, you must first completely forget its current price. This wasn't a grocery item, it was a sacred offering, a tool of divinity. The Egyptians used it, alongside myrrh, in their elaborate mummification rituals, a preservative for eternal life. The Hebrews included it in their holy anointing oil, a fragrant sign of divine selection. Long before Rome's glory days, cinnamon was already a spice for the gods and for royalty. When Rome arrived on the scene, they inherited and amplified this belief. Consider the most famous, most extravagant example of cinnamon's status, the year 65 AD. Emperor Nero's young wife, Poppaea Sabina, dies. A tragedy, yes, but also an opportunity for a display of power. Nero, arguably the most extravagant emperor in Roman history, does not merely bury her. He burns an entire year's supply of the empire's cinnamon at her funeral pyre. Think about that for a moment. This wasn't a small chest. This was a staggering amount of precious cargo, likely tens of thousands of pounds, consumed in a single roaring blaze. It was an act of profound, almost impossible opulence. A single spice deemed worthy of the greatest fire in history. It sent an unmistakable message to the entire empire and the world. Rome is rich beyond measure, and its rulers are divine. The sheer monetary value was mind-boggling. At its peak, cinnamon was priced by weight against silver, and sometimes even gold. The historian Pliny the Elder famously lamented the economic cost of the empire's taste for luxury, calling the eastern trade routes a massive drain of specie, gold and silver, out of the Roman treasury. Pliny calculated that the imports of India, China, and Arabia were costing the empire 100 million sesterces a year, and the most coveted of these imports, after only silk, was spices, with cinnamon at the very top. For a Roman senator, a small box of cinnamon was not just a spice cabinet addition, it was an investment. It could be used as an emergency currency, a highly portable form of wealth, or a magnificent gift to secure a political alliance. It symbolized ultimate status. Only the wealthiest patricians and the imperial family could afford to burn it, eat it, or use it in perfumed ointments. Why this astronomical price? Because the Romans didn't know where it came from. Not precisely. For centuries, the entire supply chain was deliberately cloaked in terrifying myth and enforced by violence. This is where the bloody spice wars truly begin. The source of the world's finest cinnamon, Cinnamomum verum, or Ceylon cinnamon, was the island of Sri Lanka, known then as Taprobana. But the primary controllers of the trade route for millennia were the Arab traders of the Near East. They were the intermediaries, the middlemen, and they fiercely protected their near monopoly. They did this not only through naval force and strategic control of ports, but through a sustained campaign of disinformation. They spun terrifying, fantastical lies about the spice's origin to justify the inflated cost and discourage any direct investigation. They told ancient writers like Herodotus of giant aggressive birds called cinnamon birds who built their nests high atop inaccessible cliffs from cinnamon sticks. To gather the spice, they claimed they had to lure the birds with massive pieces of donkey meat, which the birds would carry back, only to have the heavy meat crash the nests to the ground, where the traders would quickly gather the fallen spice and flee. Other myths spoke of deadly serpents guarding pepper fields or the difficulty of sailing across scorching magical seas. The reality, of course, was far more mundane, but no less dangerous. The real hazard was the vast distance, the unforgiving desert routes, the endemic threat of piracy in the Red Sea, and the ruthless cunning of the traders who changed the spice's price at every stop. Every time the spice changed hands, from the harbors of Ceylon, up through India, into the Arabian Peninsula, into the great spice hub of Petra or Palmyra, and finally into Roman hands in Egypt, the price multiplied. The Roman consumer was paying a 50x markup, funding a hidden empire of desert sheiks and daring sea captains. The Romans hated paying this monopoly tax. They were the world's great engineers and administrators, and by the 1st century AD, they had had enough of funding foreign profiteers. Their critical breakthrough was not a military conquest, but a crucial geographical and meteorological discovery: the secret of the monsoon winds. For a long time, Roman vessels sailing the Red Sea were limited to timid coast-hugging voyages, fearing the open ocean. This restricted them to the Arabian-controlled ports. But around the reign of Augustus, Roman and Greek sailors began to fully comprehend the predictable rhythm of the Indian Ocean monsoons. The key discovery is often attributed to the Greek sailor Hippolus, though the knowledge was likely pieced together by many. Hippolus is said to have realized that from approximately April to October, the winds blew reliably from the southwest, and then, from October to April, they reliably reversed, blowing from the northeast. Suddenly, the Romans realized they could bypass the middlemen entirely. Ships could sail directly from Roman-controlled Egypt, specifically from ports like Myos Hormos and Berenice Troglodytica, across the open Indian Ocean, straight to the major trading centers of southern India and eventually Sri Lanka. This direct trade route, known as the Monsoon Road, was an audacious act of commercial warfare. The scale of the operation was astonishing. Pliny records that up to 120 ships were sailing from Myos Hormos to India every year. This influx of direct trade broke the ancient Arabian monopoly on key spices like pepper and cinnamon. The cost dropped dramatically, making cinnamon available not just to Nero, but to the entire upper crust of Roman society, cementing the spice's place in their daily lives and, crucially, their kitchens. This strategic move broke the power of one empire and secured the opulence of another, all thanks to a piece of bark and the wind. The floodgates of cinnamon were opened, but how exactly did the Romans use their new, highly prized treasure once it reached the sun-drenched markets of the empire? When we think of cinnamon today, we think sweet, buns, pies, hot drinks, but the Romans, like all ancient cultures that encountered it, understood its full potential. They used it in everything. For the Romans, cinnamon was a triumvirate of utility: culinary spice, medicinal tonic, and perfume. First, as medicine, the Romans viewed all spices as inherently healthful. Cinnamon was used as a digestive aid, a warming agent for chills, a key component in medicinal tonics, and even, as some texts suggest, as a reputed aphrodisiac. Its natural antibacterial properties meant it was a decent preservative, helping to keep foods fresh longer in the Mediterranean heat. Second, as fragrance, recall Nero's funeral pyre. The Romans adored strong aromas. Cinnamon was crushed and mixed with oils to create expensive, long-lasting perfumes and ointments. A wealthy Roman might scent his clothing or his bed with cinnamon-infused oil, making him literally smell like a king's ransom. And finally, in the kitchen, the most common misconception about Roman food is its love of the sweet and savory combination. They did not separate their flavors as we do today. A typical Roman dinner, cena, would often feature dishes that combined honey, mint, pepper, and cinnamon, often alongside fish sauce, garum, and wine. It was a riot of intense, complex flavors designed to impress and excite. The best way to understand this is through their famous spiced wine, conditum paradoxum. No discussion of Roman cinnamon use is complete without this drink. Conditum paradoxum, which translates roughly to the surprise spiced wine, was the centerpiece of the convivium, the Roman dinner party. It was both an aperitif and a showpiece of luxury. The recipe, as preserved by Apicius, is a labor of love. You take a measure of honey, mix it with wine, and then introduce a complex array of spices: saffron, pepper, mastic, bay leaves, and crucially, cinnamon and cassia. The mixture is boiled, strained, and then often mixed with a richer, sweeter wine like passum, raisin wine, before being served chilled. The preparation was a performance. The spices were carefully measured, ground in a mortar, and slowly incorporated. The result was a thick, heady, intensely aromatic liquid that was unlike anything we drink today. It was a literal taste of the trade routes in a cup. Local wine mixed with the most exotic, far-flung products of the East. To offer a guest conditum paradoxum was the ultimate statement of hospitality and wealth. Our guide to the Roman kitchen is Marcus Gavius Apicius, or at least the compiler of the only surviving Roman cookbook, De Re Coquinaria, on the subject of cooking. Apicius was a notorious gourmet and epicure who lived during the reigns of Augustus and Tiberius. His love of luxury was so great, legend says, that he spent his entire fortune on food, and when only a small amount remained, he committed suicide, believing he could no longer live a life of true Epicurean pleasure. The Apician text is sparse, as was common for ancient recipes. It's more of a memory jog for a trained cook than a step-by-step guide. It is within this text that we find two of the most popular uses for cinnamon in sweet dishes, which the Romans called dulcia, sweets. Today, we will revive two of these ancient treats, one simple and one complex, to fully experience the flavor Nero burned. The first recipe is simple, yet decadent. It's called Dulcia Domestica, or household sweets, better known today as dates Alexandrine. It's a pure expression of Roman luxury, combining the sweetness of the East with the spices of the Empire. The original text reads, dates or palms, with the stones removed, and stuff them with nuts or nut kernels and ground pepper. Salt the dates on top and bottom and fry in cooked honey and serve. Wait, pepper? In a sweet dish? Yes, Roman cuisine loved the contrast. Furthermore, scholars believe that in the 1st century AD, the word pepper was used somewhat loosely, sometimes referencing any expensive powdered spice, often including our cinnamon. We are going to do a version that honors both the black pepper and the cinnamon, creating a perfect balance. The ingredients: dried medjool dates, pine nuts, a Roman staple, walnuts or other nut kernels, clear honey, the Roman sweetener, ground black pepper, Ceylon cinnamon or cassia, sea salt. We begin by prepping the dates, a valuable trade commodity from Egypt and North Africa. They must be carefully pitted. Next, the filling. We use a mortar and pestle to grind the pine nuts and walnuts. This provides a satisfying crunch against the soft date. We introduce a touch of fresh ground black pepper for that quintessential Roman kick, and a generous spoonful of our star, the prized cinnamon. This filling is the heart of the dulcia. The dates are then meticulously stuffed, a careful, luxurious process. Once stuffed, we honor the text by sprinkling a tiny amount of sea salt on top. The salt is the ancient secret to enhancing sweetness, a perfect microbalance of flavor that Roman cooks understood intuitively. Finally, the glaze. The dates are arranged in a bronze-like pan, and our warming honey is drizzled over the top. Honey was the primary sweetener, as cane sugar would not become widely available in the West for another 1,000 years. A quick heating, just enough to melt the honey into a glossy coat and warm the spices inside. Once they come out, a final dust of the spice that caused an empire-spanning war. This is it, Dulcia Domestica, a Roman emperor's candy. A bite of history made possible by a vast, bloody, and dangerous global trade network. Our second dish is a slightly more complex baked treat, the Roman predecessor to the modern cheesecake, Savillum. This was not a dessert reserved for the plebeians. It was served at the finest banquets. The recipe is attributed to Cato the Elder in his work De Agricultura, and later adapted by others. It is one of the clearest examples of cinnamon's use in Roman baking. The ingredients: ricotta cheese or fresh curd cheese, flour, spelt or wheat, eggs, honey, cinnamon, bay leaves. First, we mix the cheese, flour and eggs to create a thick, cake-like batter. This is the simple rustic base of the Roman cake. Into this, we introduce the flavor of the trade winds, generous amounts of golden honey and finely ground cinnamon. This is where the price of the spice is truly realized. This would have been a cake reserved for the highest feast days. The crucial Roman twist is the baking process. Instead of simply placing the cake tin into an oven, we place it on a bed of fresh bay leaves. As the cake bakes, the heat releases the intensely fragrant oils of the bay leaves, infusing the bottom of the savillum with a subtle aromatic layer that complements the cinnamon and honey beautifully. The cake is baked until golden, then removed and immediately brushed with even more honey, sometimes mixed with a little wine to create a glossy, preserved glaze. Finally, a finishing dust of cinnamon. When we taste the two dishes side by side, we taste the full range of Roman sweet cuisine. The Dulcia Domestica is an immediate, intense hit of Eastern luxury. The Savillum is a more sophisticated, complex flavor. The cinnamon is present, but it is supported by the rich dairy, the earthiness of the flour, and the gentle, herbaceous lift of the bay leaf. It is ancient comfort food, flavored by global ambition. The revival of these recipes is a tangible link to the past, but it's crucial to remember the cost. The Roman obsession with cinnamon, pepper, and silk created a vast, intricate, and ultimately fragile trade system. The constant drain of Roman gold and silver to pay for Eastern luxuries, lamented by Pliny, was a real economic crisis. Rome had little to trade back that the East valued as highly as precious metals, leaving a permanent trade deficit. This massive outflow of wealth contributed significantly to the economic instability that would plague the later empire. The Monsoon Road was a masterpiece of logistics, but it required stability. It required Roman military control over Egypt, functioning fleets on the Red Sea, and protection from bandits and rival kingdoms. As the Roman Empire began to weaken in the West, this infrastructure began to crumble. The moment of ultimate irony came in 410 AD. When the Visigoths, led by Alaric I, sacked Rome, they didn't just demand gold, silver, and silk as ransom. Among their non-negotiable demands was 3,000 pounds of peppercorns. This shows that even in the moment of its deepest humiliation, Rome's wealth was still counted in spices. The barbarians knew the value, and they took the very commodities that had defined Rome's peak wealth. The spice wars had come home. With the collapse of Roman authority in the West, the direct trade lines across the Indian Ocean ceased. The spice trade reverted to its old model, the long, winding overland routes, controlled once again by Arab, Persian, and later Byzantine merchants. The cost of cinnamon shot back up, becoming impossibly rare in Europe once more. For the next 1,000 years, the secret of the monsoon winds was lost, and the flow of cinnamon became a trickle. The knowledge of the East was guarded fiercely, fueling the wealth of new Islamic caliphates and the rising trade republics of Italy. The vacuum left by Rome was filled by two new maritime powers, Venice and Genoa. They became the new endpoints of the spice routes, trading with the great eastern hubs like Alexandria and Constantinople. They held a near monopoly on the spice trade for centuries, creating staggering wealth for their city-states. It was the desire to break this monopoly, the Venetian Arab grip, that directly motivated the European age of exploration in the 15th and 16th centuries. Columbus sailed west, hoping to find a new route to the Spice Islands. Vasco da Gama sailed around Africa, finally re-establishing a sea route to India, which was the final, definitive end of the old overland trade. The spice wars continued, transitioning from the deserts and seas of the ancient world to the vast oceans of the globe. The quest for cinnamon and its aromatic cousins literally changed the map of the world. Cinnamon's journey from its source in Sri Lanka, across the stormy Indian Ocean to the opulent tables of Rome, is more than a culinary history. It is a story of globalization before the term existed. It's a reminder that the seemingly simple luxuries of our modern world are built on millennia of geopolitical conflict, vast fortunes, and immense personal risk. The next time you grab a cinnamon stick, remember its true history. Remember that it was a diplomatic gift, a medicinal tonic, a symbol of divine honor, and the center of an economic crisis that strained the very resources of the greatest empire the West had ever known. It's the flavor of ambition, the taste of empire, and the scent of a bloody, forgotten war. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey. If you enjoyed this dive into history and food, please like this video, subscribe to your channel name, and let me know in the comments, what ancient recipe should we revive next? Until next time, Vale.